This story is about two girls who become friends in an unlikely time period, the 60s, when in the Deep South it was not allowed to have a friendship between a brown person and a beige person. Here, I put some of the characters in because I want to put you in the middle of the book. So you're going to need some background. By the way, I love question and answer because then you all get to ask. There aren't any dumb questions. You get to ask questions, things you're curious about, things that are on your mind, that have been on your mind, that come up while I'm reading, and it just helps inform your own writing, I think. And I'm really, really happy to answer them. I encourage you to please ask questions. And I want you to know that my dear friend Martha Bedoin, who I dedicated this book in part 2, is here tonight. She has let me use some of her story, and the thing to know about the me is that it's a made up, it's a narrator. How many of you have had fiction writing in the class? Let me see your hands. Okay, okay, over here, okay. You know that as a fiction writer, you make up lies all the time. The better you can lie, the better you're doing, right? Okay, so there's a lot of lying here, or retelling, but in order to get to the truth, or the truth that you personally see. Now, Rayanne is the me, okay? And she's telling the story. It's 1963, she's 13 years old. Cookie becomes her friend across the woods. Miss Jessie is Cookie's aunt, and she also works in the household of Rayanne. Ivory Jones is Cookie's brother. Miss Jessie is raising Cookie and Ivory Jones. Waldo and Margot are married geese, and you need to know that, it's important. And Cookie takes care of Waldo and Margot. And then if you hear any references to Daddy or Mama, that's Rayanne's family. As the story goes, little Rayanne is a product of her culture. She's kind of a racist brat, a single child, but she has a family that's very dysfunctional. Her mother has gone crazy, is in the bed all the time now, and her father has some ulterior motives for the mother. He comes from poor, she comes from money, and he's doing his best to get her put away in what we used to call Chattahoochee, which was the crazy people place. And he's the hospital administrator, so he gets her put away. And do you know about Chattahoochee? No. Okay. So, as the story opens, Rayanne's dad is drinking with one of his buddies, and Rayanne overhears that he wants to put the mother away, so she's figuring this stuff out. And it upsets her a lot, and the housekeeper, Miss Jessie, is upstairs, and Rayanne goes up to talk to her, and then she goes to her mother's bedroom, and her mother's messed up on drugs and alcohol, and Rayanne gets disgusted, but she's also obsessed with bones, which you find out later why in the novel. And so she takes one of her daddy's cigarettes and smokes it a little bit more. It was still lit, and puts the word bones into her mother's very fine antique table. But she never will own up to the fact that she's the one who did it, and her mother does end up in the hospital because the father claims that the mother did it, and Rayanne's thinking it's all her fault. So she leaves the house, as any girl from a crazy house would do, and goes to ride her horse. And she goes down the road and she meets Cookie, who is an African-American girl about her age, who she's seen at school, but really hasn't known very well. And she wants to make friends with Cookie, and Cookie is cautious, but she goes along with it, and then they become friends. But they can only meet in the woods between their two houses because the friendship isn't allowed in the early 60s. And then there's a point where some fellas come over drunk to the dad's house, and they start bragging about how they've cut off a black man's finger and put it in the freezer. And they all go off to see the finger, and then they come back, and one of them then starts talking about how Rayanne is starting to look like a woman, and then one says, well, I'm going to go check on her, and Rayanne's so scared she goes into the closet of her bathroom and hides and waits till he leaves, and then she just jumps out her window and goes to their little secret hideout in the woods. Well, the next day Cookie goes and finds her in the hideout and says, why don't you come over to my house? And as you probably know, that's prohibited, and so you find out what happens. Let's see if there's anything else you need to know. And Rayanne has a crush on Ivory Jones, who is 16 and has a job at the hospital where the father works. All right, I'm going to read you about 11 pages, and then I'll open things up for questions. Do y'all think you understand sort of what's going on? Okay. Now I'm going to put on my little North Florida twang, okay, with nasal. Summer was sliding in, hot and wet as tears. The sun blazed on Miss Jessie's garden. A wind came out of the swamp and slapped the green stalks of sugar cane together. Cookie and me drained the sweet iced tea, but still it felt too hot to hang around the yard, and we had our orders from Miss Jessie. Inside it was curtainy, dark and stifling, but Miss Jessie had instructed us to stay put. We passed the time playing cards, putting ice on our foreheads, and listening to songs on Cookie's record player. Ivory Jones and Miss Jessie returned from the downtown market and were unloading the groceries. Get on out of this house, Miss Jessie said, shooing us towards the screen door. The honeysuckle and the mimosa tree hung, swaying in the slightest bit of breeze while the crickets played background music. The geese stayed cool under the shade and panted like dogs. We bought the record player on the porch and listened to Ray Charles while we argued over whose fingernails had grown longer. Don't y'all girls be fighting out there, Miss Jessie said. Then out burst Ivory Jones through the door he'd set swinging. He tossed a football in the air. Let's play football, I said, jumping up. No, Cookie said. Go on, she said, batting the hand like to shoo him away. Go on, we're playing our own game. Get your own friend. You scared I'll make a cream of you both? Ivory Jones said, tossing the ball into the air, then glancing at Cookie with raised eyebrows. She didn't say anything but crossed her arms and gave him a look that would fry meat. He craned his neck to stick his face closer to hers. Huh? He said. Come on, I said, let's play football. Oh, all right, Cookie sighed and dropped her arms. She stomped to the front yard where the grass had been mowed flat like a field. The chiffons crooned out, doo-lang, doo-lang, doo-lang. He's so fine. Sorry, I have a terrible singing voice. But Cookie has a great singing voice. Ivory Jones showed us how to play center, quarterback, and receiver. Then he explained how to play defense, which meant tackling. He got us into a pattern of Cookie as quarterback, himself as receiver, and me on defense. After Ivory Jones hiked the ball to Cookie, and before she could get the ball out of her hands, I leapt into the air and tackled her around the waist. Her eyes got big, and the whomp of her back on the ground surprised us both. Dang, girl, she said. Sorry, I said, giving her a hand up. I didn't mean, did I hurt you? You can't hurt Cookie, Ivory Jones said, picking up the ball that rolled beside us. He twirled it in the air and said, she's too mean. Cookie stood up holding my hand with one hand, and quick as the wind, she punched her brother hard in the stomach with the other. He doubled over and covered his belly with his arms. Ivory Jones, she said, you hurt? He stood up grinning. You can't hurt a fly, he said. Then she hit him again, and they tumbled on the ground laughing. At first it scared me to see them tussling on the ground like that. Then they were laughing. I felt like I'd interrupted a private moment. I wanted a brother so bad I could taste it. Or just to roll on the ground like that with Ivory Jones. He stood and gave Cookie a hand up. In the next formation, Cookie threw one to Ivory Jones, and I lit out after him. He must have been running slow. If he'd run fast, I'd have never caught him. He was long-legged fast, but I surprised him when I leaped into the air and grabbed him from the back around the chest. We sailed toward the ground only because the force of my body was nearly rushing sideways. We hit the ground together hard, but I did not care. Somehow he got turned around and seemed like I had landed smack dab in the middle of his chest. It felt hard but soft at the same time. It took the breath out of both of us, and we laid staring, surprised at each other, neither of us making an effort to move. I will never forget it, how that singer was crooning on the record player and Cookie with him. I just can't wait to be held in his arms. I felt his guy body under me. I did not want to move, and neither did he by the looks of it, until the ball hit us both wham upside the head. Then Cookie said, "Hey, what y'all doing laying up all on each other?" She came to stand over us, scowling, her shadow on our faces. I rolled off when we both stood up fast, brushing grass from our clothes. She directed her look at Ivory Jones. "You getting all light-struck?" she said. She picked the ball up from where it had rolled and hooked it under her arm. She stared Ivory Jones down. He looked like a kid who'd eaten all 5 pieces of gum in the pack. "What's light-struck?" I wanted to say, but I did not. It had something to do with me. "Just let it lay," Ivory Jones said, brushing off. "You the most bogus." Then he ran at her and tackled her. Cookie started laughing in spite of herself until he snatched the ball and ran off with it. She threw him down and snatched the ball back, stood and walked away like that African queen I'd expected she could play in the picture show. That seemed to settle something I did not understand, me being white and all, but I was glad we got back to playing football. We threw and caught and flung each other down all afternoon. We fell in dirt and grass, and it smelled clean and scary together. The geese chased us around, especially Margot, tugging at my shirt until Cookie said, "Get out of here, Margot. Don't be bothering her." She tossed the football in the air. "She's not bothering me," I said. I patted Margot's smooth, thin head. She'd finally started letting me pet her. "Neither is Ivory Jones falling all on you by the looks of things," she said. And to him she said, "And since when did you get so sweet to let people catch you?" She threw the football at him. "You better watch out, boy, slowing down and getting all sweet on little Rayanne." He gave her a daggery look. "You can see that Cookie is good at running her mouth, if not the ball," he said, and stripped the ball right out of her hands. Then, sudden as a cat, he bounded up the steps of the porch. He came back out, cleaned up and dressed for work. He waved bye and drove off. When it got too hot, Cookie and me drank more tea and shared a big loot of strawberries from the side yard bushes. The lights started to grow fainter and then turned a darker blue. I played with the geese as the day finally cooled and a breeze came up. At twilight, we ate grilled cheese sandwiches and watched the tiniest sliver of a new moon rise. Cookie and I were hanging around on the concrete steps, her in the rocking chair, me on the block steps, singing my favorite song of the week, "I don't like you, but I love you." Miss Jessie came out to have her usual smoke of cigar and sit in the creaky old rocker. The crickets were singing, cicadas crackling, and breeze blew up to cool off the world. I could hear the creek just barely chirping a trickling song across the woods. "Okay, Rayanne, time for you to get on home," Miss Jessie said. Cookie stood up and started in. "But, no buts," Miss Jessie said. "You can walk her across the woods, but you come right back, Cookie. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am," she said. Once in the woods, we stood by the creek catching tadpoles to let them go again. "What you pouting about?" Cookie said. I hadn't realized I was. I thought how normal Cookie's family seemed. Nobody was drinking a lot and fighting mean and talking bad about girls, even without a real mama or daddy around. "I don't know nothing," I shrugged and sat down. "Don't want to go home?" Cookie said. I shook my head no. She went on. "Miss Jessie said your daddy won't be worth a wet rag. Sneak in the back way if you're scared." "It ain't that," I said. Usually this time of day I might give Star a little grain and talk to her. I'd practice cheerleading stunts in the front yard by the grass, or turn on TV to watch Lucy or My Favorite Martian or The Honeymooners, or even turn on the sprinklers if the grass needed watering just to smell the light, fresh smell. Not tonight. Suddenly it seemed like everybody had somebody, a nice home with card playing and plans for Sunday school. I started to spill it out. "It's all my fault," I said, "and Mama's going to go to Chattahoochee. Daddy's planning it, and it started as my fault." "Chattahoochee," Cookie said. "That's for crazy people." I mean really crazy people. Dang, girl. She sat down. How's she getting there? When? I don't know. I just know he's planning it. I don't know why he thinks she needs to go, I said. I did not want to tell her about my burning the table. Why is it your fault, she said. I'm not a good daughter, I said, and I don't know how now if Red's going to be there too. I don't want nothing to do with him. He's the one who's chased her upstairs. Well, she said, it got quiet except for the creek running. I guess I got to go, I said. Wait, Cookie said. If you want to, if you're too scared to go home, I can sneak you in and let you sleep on the floor. Really? I said. I sat up and looked at her to be sure. Yeah, but we got to be real quiet, and you need to stay low till we go off to church tomorrow morning. Then you can leave out the back. I listened to her plan and said, okay. What a relief. I could stay away another night. I sneaked up to the top of the hill through the woods and walked back toward the pastures to feed Star. Then I returned to the hideout. As soon as I thought it might be late enough, I sneaked back to Cookie's window and tapped with a stick. She tapped back, and that meant she'd unlock the screen on the back door so I could go in. And that is how I ended up sleeping on the floor of a colored house. As I fell asleep, I heard an owl in a nearby tree starting to hoo-hoo, ah, hoo-hoo, hoo, ah. Soon I could hear Cookie snoring. I followed right behind her. Okay, the next day is Sunday. The next morning, I woke up to clattering in the kitchen and the smell of sausage cooking, which somehow did not bring me comfort. A bad feeling fell over me like it just poured down from the sky and heaped through the mattress to me. I lay between the bed and the wall, knowing I'd have to stay still and wait until everybody left for church. I crawled under the bed and peeked out so I could see. Ivory Jones and Cookie were getting ready for Sunday school, their legs walking between the bathroom and the bedrooms. They brushed their teeth, ran tap water, flushed the toilet. Miss Jessie already had put on her powder blue Sunday dress, which I could barely see the bottom of. Cookie argued that she did not feel like feeding Margot and Waldo, but Miss Jessie told her to shut her mouth and move her feet. So Cookie, wearing her bright orange Sunday dress, skipped back to the bedroom, jumped onto the bed, reached down and touched my foot. Then she skipped to the living room and out the door. I wondered if I could stay one more night in the hideout with just some blankets. Then I heard a sound, like something wild. I lay still and listened. Then something wailed, some sound that slashed through this perfect Sunday morning. It was Cookie, screaming. Ivory Jones tore out the door. I peeked out long enough to see him running by in a blur, wearing his black Sunday suit. I felt hot and cold together, frozen under the bed. What on Jesus' earth, said Miss Jessie as she flew past the opening from the bedrooms to the dining room. I crawled out and peeked around the doorway to see her charge through the screen door and outside. She held her favorite yellow vase that she'd put fresh daisies in the day before. I scrambled through the living room and onto the porch to see Ivory Jones and Miss Jessie stop dead in their tracks halfway down the yard. Just beyond them, by the rut driveway, was Cookie. No, he's dead! No, no, no! Cookie screamed. She ran in a circle around a white heap of feathers on the road. There was blood on Cookie's hand and on the front of her orange dress, and white feathers stuck to the blood smeared on her neck. She flopped down and hugged the white thing and got up again, more bloody and feathery. My knees caved in and I sat right down on the front steps. Ivory Jones ran toward Cookie. Cookie got up and screamed, no, no, no! Waldo's head lay at an impossible tilt up and away from his body. His beak pointed towards the house. His wings were spread out like he'd fallen splat on his stomach in a belly flop. Even from where I stood, I could see his eyes staring at the Sunday blue sky. All around, the ground was wet and dark. Cut his throat, I heard Ivory Jones say. Tried to cut off his head. Oh, my sweet Cookie, Miss Jessie said. She handed the vase to Ivory Jones and held her arms out to Cookie. Cookie backed away, arms out in front of her, pink palms out, but bloody. A few downy feathers stuck to her fingers. She said, no, no, no. Miss Jessie grabbed Cookie's wrist and drew her in. She put one arm around Cookie and said, "Now settle down, baby. Settle down." As Cookie sobbed into her auntie's neck, Ivory Jones stood frozen. I was twisted up inside. Something awful was trying to squeeze out of me. I put my hand to my mouth to keep in whatever wanted to come out. I tasted dirt, so I spit. It felt good to spit, so I spit again. That's when Ivory Jones saw me and looked surprised, not knowing I'd spent the night. "It's okay, baby girl," Miss Jessie was saying. "It's okay." Miss Jessie's apron was bloody now as Cookie cried in her arms. "Who would do a thing like that?" Ivory Jones said and turned to look at me. Like, "What the hell are you doing here?" seemed like. Then I felt tickling at my feet. Margot was honking a scream herself, trying to fly up into my arms. "Margot," I said. I scooped her up and she buried her beak and face in my chest, all trembly and hard muscle tense, still honking in a panic. Miss Jessie looked at me for the first time. "Girl, what on earth are you doing here?" I said, Margot flopping, head held against my chest. "You been home?" she said. I shook my head no and made a point to look at Margot so I would not have to see the look in Miss Jessie's eyes. "Get that filthy goose out of your arms," she said, and turned to Ivory Jones. "Ivory Jones, Lord have mercy, boy, see to her. Bury the goose. Then see her out of this yard. Take her home if you have to. Walk her through the woods and watch her go up the steps." She moved her hands like I was something smelling bad that she wanted out of the way. I headed up the porch with Margot still shaking in my arms, now biting at my neck. Miss Jessie guided Cookie, limp and weak, back to the house. "You okay?" Ivory Jones said. I stopped at the foot of the steps and turned to look at him. His voice did not accuse. "You got to put that goose down," he said. I was squeezing Margot as hard as she was biting me on the neck. I put her down. "Scat, Goose," he said, shooing her under the shade of the mimosa. The sky had a brilliant blue against the peach-colored blossoms. How could this day be so pretty? Margot waddled frantic right back up to me, honking in a high screech, trembling. She walked around and around me, rubbing up on my legs. Miss Jessie had an arm around Cookie as they walked inside. I searched Ivory Jones' serious face as he frowned down at me. "Who would do that?" I said, choking, afraid of who did it and why and what they'd do next. "Who would do such a thing?" He didn't say, but glanced back at the spot on the road where the dead Waldo lay. Margot flew into me and I picked her up and cuddled her in my chest. She nestled into my neck and honked, soft and fast. "Do you think it hurt bad when he died?" I said. "You stayed here last night?" he said, studying Margot and me, then ducking under the house to get the shovel. "Yeah," I said. "Cookie sneaked me in." He shook his head, then gestured for me to go with him. "Come on, let's bury that goose." "On second thought," he said, "take this goose out back so it won't get all in my way." Then he said, "Go on, what you staring at? Just take the goose out back." When I didn't move, he said, "Come on," and he grabbed my arm with his hand and pulled me out back where I let Margot down. I sat under the tree and Margot stayed not 6 inches from my heels. My face flushed up and things spun in the heat. That was the quietest house after Ivory Jones, Cookie, and Miss Jessie got cleaned up. I could smell that the sausage had burned. The blue jays screeched as Ivory Jones dug the grave in the side yard. Cookie said nothing, just stared out the back door at the bare field beyond Margot and me. I could hear the water running in the kitchen where Miss Jessie was preparing to soak the bloody clothes and lie. "Guess we'll skip church this morning," Cookie murmured to no one in particular. "No, ma'am," Miss Jessie said. She had recovered the yellow vase from the yard where Ivory Jones had set it down. She'd picked a whole slew of tree olive blossoms, white and sweet-smelling, and had put them in the vase along with the daisies. She set the vase carefully on the kitchen counter and pulled at the stems, adjusting her arrangement. Then she stepped back and looked at it. "We will be attending church this morning," Miss Jessie said finally, "and it's time for Rayanne to go home." "But we will be," she said again, slow and firm, "attending church this morning." Then she picked up the arrangement to take it to the dining table. I said goodbye to Cookie through the screen, then got up and blocked Margot from going into the side yard where Ivory Jones was putting Waldo into the grave. "You can have her," said Miss Jessie, standing at the bottom of the back steps. "The Goose?" I said, picking her up and holding her close. "Yeah, you can have her," she said with a wave of her hand. "No, Auntie," Cookie said. She stood with the screen door open to the back porch. She started to cry again. "Hush up, Cookie," Miss Jessie said. "That damn Goose will be back. You need to get a hold of yourself. We got church to attend." Miss Jessie turned around, shaded her eyes, and looked hard at Cookie, whose lip trembled. Miss Jessie's face softened. Then she walked back to the screen door and put her arm around Cookie. "Oh, little Pearl," Miss Jessie said, and Cookie leaned into her aunt. "You are precious as a pearl. I didn't mean it, baby. You can keep her for your own self." Then Miss Jessie stood up straight like she'd made a decision. "Now hush this talk and get ready for church." Then she walked inside so I could say bye to Cookie. Margot would not stay away from me. "You can borrow her for now," Cookie said, wiping her eyes with her arm. "Maybe she needs to go away for a while." She sniffed. "Okay," I said. "I'll bring her back real soon. I think she's confused. I'll take good care of her, don't worry." I hope she didn't hear my voice shaking or see my whole self shuddering. I hugged Cookie quick around the neck. I did not know what to say or what else to do. "Bye," I said. "See you at school." "Bye," she said, and patted Margot's head. "Don't be a fool, you hear me?" she said to Margot. I headed home holding Margot, Ivory Jones looking solemn as he walked ahead of me, escorting me through the woods. Not only did I not know what to expect at home, but I had a Goose with me. And why on earth had someone killed Waldo? The geese always stayed with Cookie. They never wandered off. And now I had taken Cookie's only comfort left. I couldn't believe how hot and then cold I felt. The sky spinned around. Okay. I'm sorry to leave you all without much resolution, but it's the middle of a novel, and things just get worse before they get better. One of the things, I teach business communication in the spring at Florida State, and one of the things we try to tell students is that 65% of what you say is not in the words that you speak. It's in the things that you do. So you can make things more interesting. You can even contradict yourself with what you say and what your body says. So I kind of started using that stuff a lot when I was writing this novel.
What other types of fiction do you like to write about?
I'm writing a novel right now set off the coast of West Florida on a little island that nobody much knows about called Cedar Key, and it's an environmental story about somebody messing up the Swanee River. Yeah, and it's a single mom with 2 kids, and she's a hairstylist. And so she kind of stumbles onto the death because she goes to fix this lady's hair in the coffin, and the lady supposedly had committed suicide by shooting herself in the chest. And the hairstylist would be the only one who might know this. She sees that her neck's been cut, and she's like, "What's up?" Yeah. So that's just the beginning. You know, in fiction, you have to make bad things happen to good people. That's terrible, but it's true. Mm-hmm. The best writing I do is at Hambidge Center. I'm alone in a cottage. You're going to hate this. There's no technology except your laptop. No telephone, no television. You might have an air conditioner. And if you want, you have a kitchen, but there's nothing to distract you from just thinking, full out thinking, and working on your stuff. So that's my best writing time. Then I'll write a draft, and it's pretty bad, and then I go back in and start rewriting and adding stuff and taking stuff away, and then I'll go back and do it again. Yeah.
Follow up to that question. Do you have to be in a certain mood, or you just write like a certain time of the day each day, or?
I should, and I used to, and I don't anymore. I am thinking about starting back in the spring. I have a friend in Tallahassee who's a writer, and he's got 3 kids. He's a county commissioner, and he's a lawyer. But he somehow finds the time. He gets up an hour early with his coffee and writes. I'm going to try to do that. All right, let me talk a little bit about plot. To have a plot, you need a little bit of structure, and that is, you need a character who wants or needs something very badly. Very badly, desire, okay? Then there have to be some things that get in the way, obstacles. And then you have to very simply answer the question, does Rayanne get what she needs? Does Cookie get what she needs? Does Miss Jessie get what she needs? All the characters, but the main 2 are these 2. And it's yes or no, which means it's a comedy or a tragedy. And sometimes it's maybe. But you have to answer that question. So that goes for short stories or novels or any kind of narrative. The best thing you can do is eavesdrop, and dialogue is sloppy. We don't talk the way we, and and just now I didn't say yes, I said yeah, because and just listen. Sit in a cafe. Martha and I were sitting outside, and just right here, and we could be a spy. Listen to it. It's there. It's there. You've got it. Just let it come out. Trust yourself. And you want to, nowadays, I know back, any of you know who Zora Neale Hurston is? Yes. Okay, great. All right. Now, she wrote with, like, I'm dying to go home. But nowadays, she was trying to preserve the African American language, the way it was spoken. Nowadays, I'm dying to go home. But it's the way it's said that you hear that it's not, I'm dying to go home. It's, I'm dying to go home. Because you hear it in the way that she says it and in what she says. I'm fixing to leave out of here. Now, I'm fixing to leave out of here. That is not what you hear when you see this. You hear, I'm fixing to leave out of here. You know what I'm saying? So you say it, you spell it correctly, but just the actual words, the word choices, and the way it's put together tells you how it's said. Does that make sense? Okay. And even if you're doing standard English, like you guys, you probably don't, but we don't say things like, are you ready to leave? Should we go now? We say, let's blow this place, or what do y'all say?
Let's split.
What?
Some people say let's split.
Let's split, yeah.
I'm out of here.
I'm out of here.
But you want to be careful not to use slang, though.
Too much. You want to use it some, but not too much, yeah.
How do you go about selecting a time period?
I wasn't very good at it. I made the songs. I chose songs that were too late for this time period, because this is before King was killed, and it was when the Civil Rights Act, kids had to be integrated and all that stuff. But my songs were too late, so I had to go back and re-research the songs at the last minute. And those were some really good songs I had to lose. But anyway, got some good ones anyway. So you do want to be careful. I do a lot of research. I go to the newspapers. I go to other people's nonfiction to get some of the stories that happen. I look at photos of the old buildings, all that kind of stuff. Good question. I have a daughter who, when she was born, I started writing this. And as I wrote the story, and it took me 17 years to get it finished. As the narrative went along, she had different needs and wants and all that stuff. And, you know, by the time she was 15, I had to put a little bit of sex in there, you know, because, you know, they're certainly thinking about it by then. So that's how, by listening to her friends, just, you know, writers just have to be really good observers. It took me a lot less long to put together my short story collection. I wrote a lot of short stories at once. I started off as a poet, and then I started writing short stories and liked it and wrote a whole bunch of them, and they started getting published more than the poetry did. So I got a short story collection. Somebody asked for my short story collection, so I got that published first. Then I got interested in multicultural lit and multicultural studies and wrote a textbook for my students. And about that time, my poetry collection got picked up. And it took me, that's about 20 years of work in that. And, you know, tell you the truth, I just write all the time. And if I'm lucky, I get something published, you know. It depends on you, too. But there's a writer at FSU who's written, oh my gosh, how many books has she written? Tons of books, and she has 4 or 5. 4?
I think it's 5, maybe. I don't know.
She's Catholic and believes that you should be Catholic and reproduce. And one of my friends went over to her house once and said, my God, you know, the kids are throwing things and stuff's going on, and she's typing away. Yeah, it's a good idea to start trying to get your stuff published early on, because that puts your name out there in different people's eyes, and it's real good to get published in literary magazines, and literary magazines that have a press connected to them sometimes is helpful, just because every now and then somebody will like your work, they like your style, and they'll pick you up. I'm a fiction editor of the Appalachia Review, and we look all the time for great stories. And a New York agent always reads our magazine, and when he sees something he likes a lot, he'll email me and say, hey, could you give me so-and-so's, I like such and such a story. Can you give me so-and-so's email or contact information? And he's done that a lot. And he is actually her editor. Nat Sobel is his name. Now, if you want to get published, you need to make sure that story is just perfect. And remember that you've got, like, we have a pile. And we have a bunch of people who read for us. So you want your first paragraph to be absolutely incredible. And it has to make people go, oh, what's the next paragraph? Then what happens? So you want the language to be good, and you want to give some sense of, if not their desire, just at least something interesting about, just unique about the character to catch the editor's eye. Okay, and then the whole story needs to be good and tight. And if you get a rejection with a nice note on it, you're really lucky. Usually it's just a typed rejection, but you have to get through that too. You have to develop a thick skin and not worry about being rejected. I don't know if you all have heard of the book, The Help. She got turned down 50 times. It's been on the bestseller list for 86 weeks. And she got turned down 50 times before somebody took it. What happened to me with this, I'd had it in a drawer for a couple of years, and I swapped novels with this friend, and she said, "Why isn't this published already?" And I thought, because I've been lazy and I let the rejections get to me, and so I sent it out again and it got taken. So find a good, supportive friend, I think. And bleeding on the page, yeah, I think you have to do that. You have to do that. Otherwise, it wouldn't matter. And then you put it aside for a while. Put it aside for a week, a month, whatever it takes, and then go back and say, oh, well, maybe she doesn't say this many sentences. Maybe she says 3 instead of 5. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you again, Mary Jane. And
thank you all. What a great group. Thank you. You all are great. Good luck with your writing.